Anyway, I hope you've gotten the message from me this weekend that if you struggle in your marriage or your dating or whatever, welcome to the club, the Struggling Humans Club. Let me tell you a little about our organization. Number one, if you're not a member of our club, you're a member of another club. Anyway, and we have said that just like the gospel, marriage has to start with our need for mercy and growth. And we've talked some about that growth, and we've talked about four abilities that we need, and we've talked about intimacy, and we have said that in a sense, the two biggest pieces of marriage are intimacy and mutuality. So lastly here this morning, I want to talk about essentially our second I, which is identity. If I'm me and you're you, what do we do with that? How do we both matter? How do we make sense of that? Let's talk about the issue of conflict, of us both existing, both mattering, of making sense of that terrible nightmare that you married someone who is not you, all right? But if I'm me and you're you, we're going to have conflict. So point number one is that conflict is necessary. It's unavoidable. People say, we have conflict. Actually, what you're probably saying is we have fights, which we'll get to. Conflict is how two people make sense of not being the same person. Conflict is how two people make sense of not having the same brain, all right? Billion-dollar government grants have produced the following information. Relationships are always more difficult with two people in them, all right? That's your tax dollars at work. So those couples who say, oh, we never fight. I'm like, yuck. You know, either one of you is asleep or complying, or you're both just too nice, but something's missing there and something's getting vanilla, you know? I was meeting with this guy once, and he was dating this girl, and he's like, oh, she's perfect. I found this wonderful girl. She's amazing. Oh, we got to get married. I think I'm completely in love. I mean, what do you think, Doc? And I said, well, have y'all fought yet? And he goes, no, we don't fight. It's wonderful. And I said, well, you need to have a fight. And he goes, why? We're so happy. We don't have anything to fight about. And I said, well, make something up. Pick a fight. He's like, why? I said, because you can't, as the seraph says to Neo in the Matrix, you cannot truly know someone until you fight them, all right? So conflict is cool, but that's not the problem area. That's not the plot twist. The real issue is when you have a disagreement and you're not getting what you want, and your spouse isn't getting you again, and you don't feel like they're letting you matter. You walk in, you see they've left their clothes on the floor again. You know those things. Norma cleans up behind me. I mean, like, right behind me. So I like to cook. So I like cut an onion, you know, and put the knife down to reach for a bell pepper, and she'll have the knife all cleaned and back in the knife block. I'm like, where's my knife, you know? I tease her that if I get out in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, I come back and she's made up my side of the bed. I'm like, come on! Give me some room. All right. Or you need them emotionally and they blow you off, or you need them sexually and they blow you off, or they're telling you how to drive, you know, the marriage killer. But instead of working through the problem or asking for what you need in an adult manner, right? You snap, you jab, you go, you know what? Something switches in that conflict to, you know what? I'm really sick of, you know, you really are just like my dad. You know, or the room just gets kind of icy all of a sudden. Like when the Dementors come on Harry Potter, you know, like, you can feel it, you know. And your hurt turns to anger. And your fear turns to anger. Anger is basically a defense against vulnerable feelings. Remember, we alluded to that last night. So now, all of a sudden, you're angry and you hurt them. And they hurt you back. And now you're off the races. And what was a conflict is now a fight. So point one, conflict's fine. Conflict's good. Point two, fights are not good. Fights and conflicts are different things, okay? And fights are what I want us to focus on, because if a conflict can just stay a conflict, two people solving a problem, we can solve that one, no big, right? But the moment it becomes a fight, you ain't trying to solve or resolve anything anymore, Cinderella, okay? You're just trying to win and hurt, and you're angry and you hurt back. And they're trying to hurt you back. And guess what? Old Mr. Problem, the one who's actually started all this, as you two are fighting and going at it against each other, the actual problem that needs to get solved, he's sitting over here all by himself and nobody's even paying any attention to him and nobody ever solves him, which is why you're having the same fight since college, right? Those are so busy blaming again. So I want to deconstruct fighting a little with you this morning. They're by definition these complex flowing dances full of all this emotional reactivity and loadedness and subtlety. And I want to sort of break them apart like I wanted to do everything this weekend and give you some left brain tools, some frontal lobe tools for this kind of reactive thing we call fighting. And I want you to get real practical in this talk. I want you to have something you can take with you to do differently this week. Okay? And that's good because it'll give you something very practical. It's bad because some of what I'm going to say is going to kind of come off oversimplified. And as I say it, you're going to, yeah, right, but what about this and that? And I want you to say that because then we get to come back in Q&A and you can help me kind of put meat on the bones for it, okay? But this is not train up your spouse in the way that they should go, and when they're old, they will not depart from it, okay? We're not, okay? It's not miracle cure. Another, by the way, we alluded to this last night. I'm assuming in this talk that you're both repentant. That both of you are saying, yeah, I don't want to fight either. Let's work on this together, honey. The unrepentant person we're going to touch on a little bit today, but the difficult people talk on the podcast has more of that. But I'm assuming you are repentant. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about what do we do when we realize we're in a fight, once the fight happens, once you've Thelma and Louised off the cliff, once the bomb has exploded, how do you put Humpty back together again, okay? Number one, what do we do when that happens? Number two, how do we start to see and understand what's happening? We need to get some perspective on the dynamics of a fight. I want you to get some frontal lobe going here, to be able to see it and think. You'll never be able to get out of a fight unless you can see and think what's happening. What am I needing? What triggered you? What is hurting about that? We're doing this thing again, all right? We've got to be able to get out of our midbrain and hypothalamus in a fight and think. Otherwise, our caveman brain is going to run this relationship like, the Terminator down to his hyperalloy metal skeleton, still kind of dragging towards you, okay? Then we got to address the hurt, because when you fight, you're going to hurt each other, and if we don't address that, it'll never go away, all right? And fourthly, how do we resolve the original problem, that conflict that started the whole thing? So that's kind of where we're going now. So bottom line is, first rule of Fight Club is, you got to talk about Fight Club. All right? His name was Robert Paulson. His name is Robert Paulson. Y'all don't know the movie? Okay, never mind. All right, it's worth a shot. It's worth a shot. All right, number one, what do we do when the fight bomb hits? First thing you do when you're saying what you always wanted to say, go to timeout. In other words, you put your kids in timeout, put yourself in timeout. This is super underused. That means somebody says, whoa, okay, I am about to snap and blow. I think I need to stop. I need to back off. Normal say what's going on? I'll say literally, I'm working. That's our code. I'm working. And that means I'm trying to process something so I don't dump it on you. Okay? Here's the reason. When we're triggered in a conflict, what it does is it floods that midbrain of ours, that amygdala, hypothalamus, that reptile brain, that caveman brain that's basically, fight, flight, or freeze. Okay? In other words, we go kind of caveman, where our only options are, fight T-Rex or run from him. And those are kind of our only options. Or in a fight, we criticize, we nag, we withdraw. The basic tools of the trade of a fight, right? To see which one of us wins, which one of us is right, which one of us is wrong, right? In other words, we do the same thing in our fights that we do with a Coke machine when it doesn't drop a Coke. Okay, think about it. You put money in a Coke machine, what's supposed to happen? Coke comes down. I like to ask some questions, kind of, confidence builders, self-esteem builders. That's good. Yeah. What do you do when you put money in a machine and no Coke drops? You start banging on it, and it's flicking the change return and all this. In other words, that's what we do in our marriages. The broken Coke machine phenomenon. I told you, we talked about this. Women are always saying that. We talked about this. Guys, let me just go ahead and tell you, this is a freebie. There's no way out of that, okay? She's got you. She wins. And you know what? You did talk about it, okay? You did. You just forgot. We don't remember. We did talk about it. She's right. Okay, but anyway. In other words, we get more aggressive, and strategically, there's a lot of problems with that kind of aggression. Problems that timeout is going to help us with. Let's look at them. Number one, timeout is going to help stop the hurt. Think about it. In a fight, you say things you don't mean. You're triggering out of that caveman brain. It's law of the jungle. It's eat what you kill. It's win at all costs. And we need to stop that part of us, like you set limits on a child, because it is a child. It's that little square 6-year-old who's throwing a tantrum and beating you up, okay? So timeout helps us stop going down that road toward hurtfulness. By the way, while we're here, let's just answer the age-old question. Is what your spouse says when they're really angry what they really mean? They're like, well, I never wanted kids anyway. And you're like, whoa, The answer is no, okay? It's just they're talking out of that primitive child part of them. Think about it. Children are global. They're concrete. They're ultimate. Nobody likes me. Everybody hates me. Okay? The rest of them knows better. Okay? But we need to get limits set on us like an out-of-control child. Okay? And timeout's going to do that. So, marriage is like fireworks. Do not attempt without adult supervision. And timeout is going to help give us that. All right? So, number two. Second reason timeout is helpful is that the goal of fighting is wrong. Think about it. The goal of a conflict is that both of us should matter. You want X, I want Y. How do we both matter? What's the goal of a fight? The goal of a fight is to win. The goal of a fight is to be the right one, right? I mean, almost every conflict in my office, I don't care whether they're talking about adding on to the house or what school they go to, but where we go, remember I said last night, our default mode is to go to blame. The other default mode in marriage is that we will tend to create any conflict and turn it into a win-lose. How do I get what I want? How do I keep you from getting what you want and taking from me? Every conflict turns into that. I don't know what, it's our sin nature or what, but I always have to do that in a marriage. All right, obviously, you guys are both trying to get what you want and neither one wants to budge. This is a win-lose. Now, that's the goal of a fight. Now, pardon me, I don't want to be insensitive or anything, but that's a terrible goal. Somebody wins and somebody loses, for crying out loud. Let me think about it. Best case scenario is what? You win, which means you're married to a loser. Okay? And the loser's not very happy. And they're going to come back and bite you at some point, okay? Think about it. How many win-lose relationships in the universe do you know that work very well? So if Starbucks starts charging, $19.50 for a cappuccino, I'm probably going to stop going to Starbucks. Win for them, lose for me, doesn't work. If I start stealing those cool little mugs they have on the shelves, win for me, lose for them, that probably isn't going to work very long either, okay? Win-lose relationships don't work, okay? The playground principle is this. Hitting the kid with the ball might get you the ball, but it's not going to get you anybody to throw it with, okay? So let's time out this headbanger ball. If you don't know what to do good, just don't do the bad. None of your solutions when you're triggered are good, and we need timeout to stop that. Now, timeout is not, timeout jerk face. I'm not talking to you anymore, all right? Nor is timeout silent treatment. Like, what? No, I'm fine. I'm just in timeout for 12 days, all right? You got to re-engage. You got to time in. All right. I was doing this conference years ago, and afterwards a woman came up and she says, I'm never going to use time out. I said, really? She goes, yeah. It'd just give him a chance to escape. All right, now, you can time out yourself. This is gold. You can say, I need a moment. This is golf, not tennis, remember? You're triggered. A church asked me to do a conference, an adolescence conference. And I said, you mean a parenting conference? They said, no, we want a conference on adolescence. And you guys who have adolescents know that that's like the most complex thing you could do. And I was really struggling. It was a hard conference to write. And I finally figured out how I wanted to do it. And I was up in my man cave working on it. And I come tumbling down the stairs and I'm like, Norma, I figured it out. I know how I'm going to do the adolescent conference. I got it. And she goes, oh, good. And goes back to like playing on her phone or something. All right, now, y'all know me by now, right? Inside, I'm starting to go, whoa, thank you for being so supportive. You're such an encouraging wife. You're just so, okay, and I'm feeling that all starting to rise up. And I don't know what to do good yet. I just know, don't do that, all right? Time out, John. Go away. Just don't do the bad, okay? I need a time out until where I can back up and start asking, what's hooking me? What do I need? What's going on here? I need to get frontal lobe here, all right? Because I'm lost back here and just this sort of like hurt. You don't even care about my conference. All right, so I need to figure out, what do I need? What do I need? What do I need to ask Norma? This is real sophisticated stuff. I need to ask her, do you care about my conference? Right? Okay, so I go back downstairs and I go, can I ask you a question? Kind of a little part question, kind of a little square. We talk like this, and I want y'all to as well. I said, do you care about my conference? Because you acted real kind of nonplussed when I talked to you about it. She goes, oh, yeah, absolutely. I'd just gotten off the phone with my mother. Remember the one who's sick? And I'm like, oh, wait, everything's not about me? Wait, I'm really confused now. Wait. All right, so the timeout gave me a chance to go frontal lobe enough to not pick a fight and go reactive. Fourth eye, all right, remember? Now, let me be real honest with you here. If you're like me, if you're going to time out yourself, you're not going to want to do it. If you're mad and you need to go to timeout, you probably aren't going to want to do it because, it feels good to be a jerk. Tell me I'm not the only one, or I'm going to get embarrassed, right? Doesn't it feel good to be mean? Sometimes I like being ugly. Sometimes I want to make my point with my finger in her face. Sometimes I don't want to let her get away with it, okay? So let me go ahead and tell you, read the fine print here. If you time out yourself, it will feel bad because it feels good to humans to be mean. Now, of course, sin nature obviously is part of the reason. Here's the psychological reason. If I am cruel to you, if I am mean to you, it works like this. It's like I have 10 pennies of like cruelty, meanness, shame, hurtful jerkiness inside of me. And that doesn't feel good. I don't like having that stuff inside of me. But if I can make you feel terrible, if I can dump 8 of those pennies on you, that's the stupidest thing. What were you thinking? That was stupid. I can't believe you did that. If I can dump those on you, now you feel terrible. You've got like 8 pennies worth of my shame and junk. I've only got like 2 pennies left. I'm feeling a lot better. Temporarily. Because you've got the freaking Denver Mint like stamping out more pennies inside of you all the time, all right? But like I'm working with a couple now and he will literally rage and then he is great. And she cries for 3 days. But he's like unloaded all of this vitriol, okay? So that's why we need to have limits set on bullies, and even when we're the bully, okay? So time out yourself. Secondly, you can catch your spouse. Time out your spouse. This is relevant to an unrepentant spouse, somebody who's being a jerk. Like we said last night, the person who walks in and goes, what are you thinking parking like that? Okay? I want you saying, whoa. I don't think we need to have a conversation that starts like that. Let's do a timeout. Can we start again? Start over, all right? The victims answer by saying, well, I thought maybe you were needing to get the garbage out later. And then they wonder why they're treated that way. Well, because you're giving them tacit permission to treat you that way by talking to them when they treat you this way, okay? I want you setting a limit on them. You can time out them. Not only does that protect us It is the only thing that jerky, unrepentant people, the only way that jerky, unrepentant people grow. What we said last night about unrepentance. I think we've so lost this distinction in our culture, in our Christian culture for sure, because we've sort of, misinterpreted the turn the other cheek thing to where it's like anytime anybody is any way to us, we need to kind of like turn the other cheek or live out Christ. Because remember, Christ is just meek and lowly, right? That's all he is. Where's his power? Where's the limit setting? This is just as much a part of growth as anything, all right? So I really want to encourage spouses who are married to people who can be jerky to learn this. Sometimes I'll have somebody in my office and they'll say like, you won't believe it, she just stood there and yelled at me for 3 hours. And I'll always like, look at their feet. And they go, what? I'm like, I was just making sure you had feet, because wondering why you sat there for 3 hours and listened to it. Confused. It's the only way that hurtful people grow. I love that passage in Psalm 18. God says, to the pure, I am pure. To the blameless, I am blameless. And to the wicked, I am shrewd. Number three, third reason that timeout is helpful is because it's going to give us a chance to think. The only thing that's going to work us out of a fight is for us to be able to think, to move up from that midbrain, that reptile brain, caveman brain. I'm talking executive functioning people, okay? And think, golf, not tennis. And that can take 15 to 20 minutes, all right? Physiologically, for us to kind of settle down. What am I needing? Why is this hooking me so much? Why is this hooking her so much? Timeout is going to buy us that time. All right? Bottom line, we are smart up here. We are dumb back here. And as long as I'm loaded, anything you do when you're triggered there is a problem. This is hugely underused. Couples who go, we've like screamed at each other till 1:30 in the morning. No. The moment you feel it go beyond the point of kindness, somebody needs to time out until y'all can get frontal lobe. Do not let yourselves just bash each other all night. I know it feels good, but it's harmful. Remember my 10 pennies. You're going to want to be mean, and you have to do a timeout, okay? So stop and think. Don't trust your feelings. You know when Obi-Wan says to Luke, Luke, trust your feelings. Obi-Wan was wrong, okay? You heard it here. That's why he had to live all alone on Tatooine. You can't maintain a relationship with a woman thinking like, trust your feelings. Come on, Master Obi-Wan, All right, anyway, time out. Hit the kill switch, Use those frontal lobes. Let's go, all right? So next step, let's use the frontal lobes. Next step is go bird's eye. One of the secrets of the universe that we alluded to this morning and that we talked about last night is that marriage problems aren't linear. They aren't cause and effect. They're cyclical, like the dance. And one of the most powerful things you can do in a conflict is to learn to back up, turn around, and look at your dance and say, hey, what are we doing here? We're doing that thing again here. Sherlock, why are we doing that? I do A, and then you do B, and then I do A worse, and we're doing it again. In other words, what we talked about last night with this question over here, can I back up and get curious? And one of the values of marriage therapy, even if your therapist is a knucklehead, or conferences, is it's really helpful for us to back up out of our marriage. What I'm helping y'all do this weekend is back up out of your marriage and look at it from the sidelines. I call that going fly on the wall or going bird's eye, okay? You get that perspective and you get power over the conflict, okay? When our kids were little, Norm and I used to have what we came to call the whose day was worse war. Did y'all ever have that? It usually starts with me coming in the door slumped with like my computer case and assuming that I had a bad day posture, kind of looking for some sympathy and hoping I'll be appreciated for all I've done. And the problem is the source of my adoration is blankly slumped over the stove cooking something I don't want for dinner. And her response to me is, hey, can you go set the table? As if to say, welcome back from your 8-hour vacation. All right. Now, I don't know about her, but I've been healing people all day. okay? I've been intervening in lives. And so I go, I'd like to sit down just a minute, which is me saying, well, what do you have to complain about? All you've done is ride around in a minivan all day, all right? And so we go back and forth, back and forth. And the repeat fight is, let's look at it, bird's eye, which one of us is going to be appreciated for how hard our day was? And so remember I said we always default to a win-lose, as if only one of us can be appreciated. Well, my day was worse than yours. No, blah, blah. At least you had adult conversation. And we go into this win-lose thing, okay? You hear the win-lose? Everybody, we learning yet, right? So bird's eye is going to ask two questions. What are we doing and what am I doing? Bird's eye one, what are we doing? What is this dance? What do Norm and I need to do? Well, first, time out. This mope fest is not going anywhere, right? Number two, we need to talk about the dance. Okay, we've done it enough. We ought to be able to back up and describe it. And what I want to do in a bird's eye is talk about it. I want to say, we keep doing this thing, don't we? I mean, I kind of come in, I've had a hard day, and I'm kind of hoping that you're going to appreciate how hard I work. And you're wanting the exact same thing, and we're kind of trying to out-pitiful each other, and it really doesn't give us anything. Do you hear how I'm just backing up and talking about us, the we? That's bird's eye. Most couples don't do that. They just live in the tennis match. Hit, 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 hit. I want you in that line judge chair, kind of looking at the game and going, we're doing that thing, okay? I had a couple just a couple weeks ago. He looks at her and he says to her, why do you think we turn every disagreement into a fight? Like we disagree with stuff, but it always turns into a fight. And I'm like, dude, he's going bird's eye without me. And she says, I think I'm afraid of doing things wrong. Or I get afraid when you do things I think are wrong. And so I think I get more aggressive at you. And he said, yeah. And I think I go to a place where I'm feeling like you're not going to let me matter. So I get more like aggressive with you. And I'm just sitting back here like, rolling in the money. Like I'm not doing anything. Why? That's why people can stop therapy. Because once you start to develop the ability to go bird's eye, they're doing it themselves. It was beautiful. I gave them gold stars and Herkies. But you hear their word here as they're talking, keyword we. What are we doing here? Just that pronoun change to we will change the chemistry of your fights. Because think about what a fight usually is. You, no you, no you, no you, right? The moment you shift to we, what are we doing? It gets us out of that pattern. Here's another one, Brian. I call this y'allness. In other words, what are y'all doing? What are y'all fighting about? I want you to back out and look at that. When I speak up north, they don't know what I'm talking about. They don't have a second person plural pronoun. It's so sad, Anyway, now sometimes you can do the bird's eye later. In other words, I call it a conflict post-mortem. In other words, you come back after the fight and go, okay, I was thinking about it, and I think when you said so-and-so, it made me feel really stupid, and so I struck back at you, and you're like, yeah, and when you struck back at me, it was like, oh my gosh, you're doing this again, and I just started hating on you, and I think we did that again, yeah. Okay, and I want you going back and talk about it, have that second discussion, that post-mortem. If you can't go bird's eye in the moment, in the timeout, come back later and do it, and that's so gonna hedge your bets for the next time, because there's going to be a next time. There will be. There will be. And if you can't get that objective together, somebody asked this question, I think on the phone, that's your sign that you need to get someone who can. People often go, well, how do we know when we need to get into therapy? If you don't have the ability to objectify yourself, you probably need someone else's eyes there, okay? All right, that's the what are we doing. This one, the next one is gold, one of my favorites and one of the most difficult, and that is what's going on for me. And this is where you go bird's eye on yourself. I want you, during the fight, after the fight, on Saturday afternoon with your friend, whatever, I want you reflecting, those times where a fight gets way bigger than it should, where your reaction is way out of proportion to what it should be, to where 2 plus 2 is equaling, 7. I want you getting curious as to where that extra 3 is coming from, okay? So after I've timed out myself, I want to sort of go, whoa, what is going on for me? Why did that trigger me? It may be a way that you've injured me in the past that we've never resolved. It may be something that you chronically keep doing. It may be a way developmentally in my own history, something I'm bringing to the table, and my inner child or my inner Godzilla is taken over, okay? That little square. I call this legacy hurts or legacy injuries. And they just sit in the background until we're, disagreeing about car insurance, and you explode and Hiroshima happens, and it's like, whoa, that escalated quickly. Like Anchorman, remember Anchorman? That escalated quickly. I killed a man with a trident. Anyway, Norma wrote a book years ago, and I was an English major, and she asked me to edit one of the chapters, and so I gladly offered my services. And took the hard copy and edited it and all that and brought it back to her and said, here's your edited chapter. And she goes, thanks. And she goes back to working. Well, here we go again. I'm realizing I'm totally getting angry. I'm totally want to go, well, oh, you're so welcome. Okay. Now, she's like, are you okay? And I'm totally time out myself because I'm wanting to bash her another one. And so I'm thinking, oh, wait a minute. I know what the deal is. Because, I grew up in kind of the generation of be a good little boy and you get a lot of praise. I wanted a lot of praise for how great my edits were. I wanted her to oh, John, let's go together and put this on the refrigerator. I wanted some real adoration. And so she's like, are you okay? And I'm like, no, but it's not about you. Trust me. All right. In other words, what's not my 2 plus 2 is equaling 7, and that wasn't coming from her. Okay. So I want you getting curious about your own response. That line in Keller's marriage book, that marriage doesn't so much put us in confrontation with our spouse, it puts us in confrontation with ourselves. That's what this one is about. I want you in confrontation with yourself here. Why does this drive me so much? All right, now we have timed out. We've gone bird's eye. Next thing, we got to address the hurt. One of the key differences between a conflict and a fight is that in a fight, people get hurt. We say cutting things, we say mean things. What does hurt mean? If I asked you to define it, it's kind of hard to define, isn't it? I think it basically refers to some sort of shorthand for being minimized, for feeling like you don't matter, for feeling like somebody's disgracing you, shaming you, putting you down. See, I was right all along. Or I can't believe you did that. Or I have a client who is committed to always telling me how stupid I am. And I actually understood something correctly the other day by their definition. And she looked at the ceiling and she lifted her hands and she said, he finally gets it. In other words, she responded to my understanding by insulting me. I felt hurt. Why? Diminished, put down, okay? Less than. I think that's where hurt is. Now, secret of the universe for making fights end good is not poor communication skills or not knowing your love language. It's this. Most humans do not know how to resolve hurt once we've caused it. We don't know how. And so it'd be like not having a healing system. And every time you cut yourself, the cut never heals. And if you've been married for 40 years, you're just like a bleeding zombie dragging bloody limbs through the house because nothing's ever healed. But that's what we're kind of like emotionally if we don't know how to heal, okay? So we got to heal the hurt because if you don't, you ain't going nowhere, boy, okay? The only thing you're going to be dealing with is the hurt. The problem is not going to be the in-laws anymore. It's the hurt. You don't even have one problem, two problems. You got three problems. You got the original conflict. You got the fact that you're now fighting, and now you're hurt. And nobody's going to be talking about anything else at this point but the hurt. All I care about now is hurting you back, or showing you that you're wrong and you shouldn't hurt me, or blah, 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 blah. And that's what your spouse is doing. And we'll do that to the old folks' home. Okay? So if we're ever going to resolve the original problem or get out of the fight, we've got to address the hurt. So let me ask y'all, what do you need if you've been hurt? What makes hurt feel better? Somebody's hurt you, what do you need from them? Being seen and heard, exactly. In other words, that you get it. This is another secret of the universe. The only thing that makes hurt feel better, the only thing that resolves an injury is not an apology, please forgive me, is that we are able to see that the person who hurts us gets it, that they care, that they understand. It's the only cure, okay? This may be the most important thing I've told you this weekend. That getting it and being understood is the way that we get healing from hurt. What that sounds like is this: once I've hurt you, can I try it on? It must have felt to you like when I did that, I didn't care at all. I so get that. I can see how that would have made you feel so stupid. Do you hear what I'm doing? I'm trying on what it's like to be them and talking to them about it. That's getting it. And we both need that. And I'm going to tell you how that works. Remember what I said about the feeling of being gotten is as close to feeling love that they're almost indistinguishable? That's what we're talking about here. And we've got to have that kind of understanding in an injury, because if we don't, we'll hold on to that injury forever, and we'll be bringing it up years later like, this is like that time on our honeymoon. You'll be going, oh my gosh, okay? Now, this isn't complicated. You experience this all the time in everyday life. You're driving down the interstate and some idiot cuts you off and you go, oh my gosh, what an idiot. But then you see him look in his rearview mirror and he kind of waves like this. And all of a sudden you're okay, right? You're like, oh, well, he knows he's an idiot. And you're like, it's all right now, you know? We both almost died, but you gave me the wave. He gave the wave. It's okay. Well, we need a rear view mirror wave in your marriage, okay? In other words, what that guy is saying is, I'm going to try it on and acknowledge, yeah, that would have been kind of jerky. That what I did, I get it. If you're probably cussing me in the car behind, yeah, okay, I understand, okay? Then I can see from their perspective that what I did would have felt that crummy to them, all right? That it's valid. That's where we get the psychobabble word validation, by the way, okay? That I can at least see there's some validity. Here's the reason that works, because hurt is about not mattering, right? Well, mattering is a commodity, kind of like money or pork bellies. And if I take some from you, you have less. If I hurt you, I take some of your mattering. So the only way to restore this is to give some mattering back. And the only way we give mattering back is by hearing someone. Hurt takes your mattering. Being heard gives it back. It's math, okay? Now, this doesn't mean you agree with them. It doesn't mean you're taking all the fault. We're just going to hear them. Follow me here. It's the only way out of this box. So this past week, Norm and I had an interaction. It was last Saturday. And I was working on my funeral. I know. I'm not dying any faster than y'all are. I mean, we're all dying, right? But anyway, writing the God book has put me in a place where I think a lot more about my future with him. And so I was just playing around with my funeral lately and like finding the music I want and what I want, something I want to write. Big surprise, I want to speak at my own funeral. Anyway, so I go downstairs from I'm in my man cave. I go downstairs. I'm real excited because I picked some cool music and I picked who I want to preach my funeral. And I go downstairs and Norma's watching the Ole Miss game last week. Because remember, I'm from Venus, she's from Mars. She wants to watch the Ole Miss game. I'm working on my funeral. And I'm like, I have some really cool stuff on my funeral. Can I talk to you about it? And she's like, yeah, sure. And so I start getting my stuff out and showing her. And as I'm talking to her, I know she's kind of like watching the game. And I'm like, this isn't a good time. We can talk about my funeral some other time. And she's like, no, this is fine. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, the first hymn I want to, and she's like, watching the game. And I'm thinking, we have DVR. Pause it. Catch up during the Tostitos ad, It's like, come on. And I can feel myself agitating, all right? And I'm like, all right, I know where this is going. And I time out myself. I say, I tell you what, I don't think this is probably going to go a good direction. And let's just talk about it later. And so I kind of made the call. Well, I was kind of quiet the rest of the day and that evening. And the next morning I was still really upset about it and realized I was angry. I was like, this is my funeral. And you want to watch the Ole Miss game? Come on. I'm like, wow. So I'm like, okay, I'm not going to let this go unless I get some understanding. So I said, can we talk about yesterday, the funeral thing and all that? And she said, yeah. I said, I'm realizing that I really kind of felt hurt. Now here, I've timed out myself to the point that I'm not in my caveman brain anymore. I'm up here. And I'm bird's-eyeing it. That hurt me, and it made me feel kind of like you said, I wasn't important. My funeral is not as important to you as the game. That felt really bad. And to her credit, she tried it on and got it. It's the only way out of this. She said, oh, so you're like wanting to talk about your eternal life. You're wanting to talk about your funeral, your relationship with God. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's 3rd and 10. What are they going to do? And that to you felt like I didn't even care. And I'm like, yes. That's when you know you got them. Yes. And I was able to let it go. Now, why? That sounds great, right? It was awesome. Why do we not want to do that? Well, why would Norma might not want to do that? Because if you do that, it gets real close to sounding like Norma saying, wow, John, so sad that you were the victim of my evil plan to make you feel like a horrible person who wasn't loved and cared about. Like, it's almost like if Norma tries it on and really gives to me there, she's out, left out in the cold, which is going to make her want to push back. We're going to go back to a blame marriage. We're going to be playing badness hot potato. We'll be back where we started. So what's got to happen? Something really sophisticated and psychological. We got to take turns. Brennan, took me 40 years to figure that out. In other words, you got to be heard and they got to be heard. And most fights are people fighting to be the one who is heard now. When you said that, I felt humiliated. Well, you don't think I was humiliated? Do you hear it? I'm going to be the one who gets heard. No, I'm going to be the one who gets heard. Well, I just feel like all I do is work. You don't think I work hard? Isn't that what our fights are? They are a fight to be heard. So what we're going to do is we're going to time out. We're going to go bird's eye. What are we doing? What am I needing? And we're going to talk about take turns hearing the hurt. So after Norma has heard me about my funeral, she gets to say, can I have a turn? You will get a turn. You hear me? Even better, I could say, wow, that's really kind that you understand that. Do you need anything from me? I get extra points for that. And you know what she gets to say? She gets to say, well, yeah, actually, it would help me if you understood me. I'd had an exhausting, hard day. I've been looking forward to just shutting my brain off, watching the game, vegging out, and down comes my husband who wants to talk about his death. I'm like, that was hard? I don't understand. There's a sense, can you try on, John, that there's a sense in which you were asking me to shift massive gears. You were asking me to shift from 3rd and 10 to your funeral. And part 2 is, it's kind of hard for me to think about your funeral anyway. I don't want you to die. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I get that. And she's like, yeah. The only way out is to take turns trying it on. Now, guess what? I get another turn. You can have turns all day long. I get to say, okay, that makes so much sense. Yeah. Hey, in the future, when I ask you, hey, is this not a good time? It would help me for you just to say, no, it's not. And she'd go, oh, I get that totally. I should have told you that, and I wasn't honest with you. See, we can do this all day long, but every time we do it, we get closer. Every time we do it, we get more warm. Every time we do it, we streamline our marriage more. That's what the taking turns hearing it thing is. And one of the key problems in a marriage is, instead of taking turns being heard, we can't sit with that tension. I want to be heard now. There's no way I'm going to hear you first. We will even say, in that conflict postmortem, we'll say, okay, let's talk about this. I think I went first last time. You get to go first this time. We will literally take turns. I want y'all to have that category, all right? So healing is what heals hurts, all right? All right, final step. And we'll have good time for questions. The good news is that you've stopped all the head banging. Bad news is, I don't think you've solved the problem yet. Remember the problem that originally started this in the first place? So we gotta solve the problem. Some fights don't start with a problem. Some fights are just because you were a jerk. You come home from work and the house is a mess, and you go, "Whoa, this place is a disaster. What'd you do all day?" Looks like guys in ski masks went through here searching for drugs. So what are you? That's not a problem to solve. You're just an idiot, okay? You need to hear her and fix the hurt, okay? But a lot of times we have to solve a problem. Here's the target. Remember, our default as dumb humans is that when we engage an issue, we're going to go to a win-lose. That's what we're going to tend to do. You want to add on the house, I don't, we're going to fight about it. Well, buckaroos and buckarettes, no fight's ever going to get better unless we figure out what it means to create a win-win. In other words, you've got to work toward a solution in which you both are going to matter. And that means you can't bully your way to get your way. You can't bring the evidence to prove that your way is right, therefore we should do it. Couples always do that. That's not how it's done. We should do this. Instead of saying, this is what I want. This is what I would like. They go, well, it's obvious that we should. They're appealing to some higher authority to get their way. You can't bully to get your way. You can't nag to get your way. You can't pull the submission card, the one that says tie goes to the husband. You have to both matter, all right? I call this matter, or mutuality. Okay? And what that means is that what your spouse wants, girlfriend wants, boyfriend wants, husband wants, has got to matter in the solution just like yours, or else you're back to a win-lose and square one. And that means whether you like it or dislike it or hate it or despise it, it has to matter, okay? And that's not always going to be what you want, but the day you said, I do, someone, in essence, said to you, do you agree to the fact that what you want will not be the only determining factor in your life anymore? And you said, I do. Okay? The good news is your spouse did too. Our family used to have an annual fight. We have 3 daughters, right? The annual fight was we would do Christmas card pictures, and which Christmas card picture would the girls approve for us to send out. And by the time they got to be teenagers, this was a giant issue. And, one year we had, 600 or 800 pictures, and there was not a picture all 3 of them could agree on. 2 of them would like it, and the other one would go, no, my hair's poofy in that one, So we finally told them, look, either you guys land on one you like or we're picking it. And so they picked one. And all that could be said about it was that nobody hated it, but it wasn't good. And so we picked it. So Callie, our oldest, who's now a therapist in Nashville, she says, oh, okay, I get it. Compromise is where everyone is equally unhappy. If I got the picture I wanted, at least one of the 3 of us would be happy. Now, none of us are, okay? So, ladies and gentlemen, in your marriage, that is your goal. I want you mutually unhappy, okay? My clients love this. They're like, great, doc, thanks. Now we're both unhappy, okay? Anyway, win-win is not a solution per se. Win-win is more like a covenant. It's more like a commitment. In other words, it's an attitude, it's a position, a lifestyle. Kind of like the Marines, no man left behind, okay? And that means, win-win means if you want Chinese and I want Mexican, win-lose says, well, I'm just going to take Mexican tough on you, or you take Chinese tough on me. Win-win says we're going to figure this out. We're going to go get Mexican and get Chinese takeout for you. We're going to get Chinese, or we're going to go to Chili's and get a Southwestern egg roll. I mean, we're going to do something to where we both matter here, okay? But we're going to take care of each other. What win-win means, what this covenant means, is that you're not going to have to make me let you matter. Another reason that we fight is that we are scared. I am scared unless I fight you, unless I work, unless I criticize, condemn, persuade, bully, that if given half a chance, you will take your way, forget about me, under the bus I go, I won't matter at all. So guess what? I'm going to fight you and try to control and take from you before you can try and control and take from me. And that's what marriage is, okay? And I want to call that out. Win-win says we make a covenant, a commitment together that says somehow we are going to figure this out. I don't know how, but we're going to figure it out. It's a commitment. It's a covenant. That means you think we're too hard on the kids. I think we're too soft. Well, let's get a parenting book. Let's talk to a professional. Let's get some wisdom. Let's both get uncomfortable. You like saving money. I like spending it. Well, we both got to stretch here. How do we both matter here? You want to talk about our issue tonight? I want to go to bed. All right? Well, I'll tell you what. How about I go to bed, but I commit that I'm the one who brings up our issue tomorrow for us to talk. We start to work to try to figure this out. You want to remodel? I don't. Let's start with one room. Kitchen. Let's get you a cool new stove. Let's see how my bonus comes out at the end of the year. But you feel the vibe is once a couple stops fighting, I'm amazed at how they get creative. Okay? So mutuality is one of us is like neither one of us loses, neither one of us wins, and we know that. Okay? Now, if I'm making that sound easy, I'm doing you wrong. It's hard. But I know that what we're talking about now is solving a problem, not a fight. And I'm just amazed at the kind of solutions couples can come up with once they stop trying to win. Okay? Neither one of you wants to fight. Fighting is not fun. Neither one of you wants to be mean. Like I said, I'm assuming you're both repentant people. So that's kind of where I want us to end this morning. Remember what I said last night about a Romans 7 marriage? I want you to have a Romans 7 orientation in your fights, and especially in those bird's eye fights after the fact. The thing I wish I do not do. In fact, I do the very thing I hate. I did it again, didn't I? I went off on you, didn't I? Let's learn and let's take care of each other. But the big orientation of all this, see, is to stop the process of you versus me, which is where a fight begins. And like we said last night, nobody's the bad guy. I want you both turning around shoulder to shoulder, looking together at the problem. What are we doing? What is going on for me? If I can't get there, let's time out. If we can't get the bird's eye, let's get a third party. But I want you on the same team. The same thing I said last night, not as enemies, but as broken, fallen friends, okay? Now, write these down. Put them in your bookcase. When Norm and I were doing marriage therapy, I would write down notes from our marriage therapy and put them in the bookcase. And when Norm and I would get into a fight, I'd go pull them out and like, okay, don't do that. Okay, right, all right. Because when you're triggered, you're going to be, caveman brain, okay? So don't trust your guts on all that. And in application to all of this, remember your body of Christ. All right, let's do questions. Ooh, lots of hands.
You talk talked about, like, with intimacy, and that's an ability that we come into the world lacking pieces of it. And the emotion being kind of the core of our relational selves, and kind of growing that horizontally in our marriages and in the body of Christ. But I was wondering, like, there's implications there vertically, and I'm just wondering if you could talk about that intimacy piece, the emotional core in our relationship with God, with Christ.
Cool.
How do you understand that?
Oh, that's good. That's fine. Couple of thoughts on that. Here's one of the things I've seen therapeutically in my own life, in the lives of my clients. A lot of the way you could characterize, if somebody said, hey, what was Cox's marriage conference about? One of the things you could say in a sense is, well, it was kind of about what our software is. In other words, everything I'm running, be it my relationship with my wife, or my relationship with y'all, or my relationship with God, runs out of the software I have. Can I be open? Can I be vulnerable? Can I trust? Can I tell the truth? Can I feel grace? Can I manage my impulses? That is software that children develop, and we can develop it as adults if we pick back up with our work and Body of Christ, therapy groups, save people. But one of the things that I've seen, and this was just mystifying to me and kind of magical to me when I first started seeing it actually happen, and that is that same software is so much the lenses through which we will experience and relate to God. So if God tells me that He washes me, though my sins are as scarlet, they'll be white as snow. But I have never had a relationship and I don't have the software to ever experience that kind of grace and that kind of safety and that kind of freedom. I can read that in the Bible all day, or read or sing hymns about it all night, and I won't feel it. I'll feel distant from Him. I'll feel afraid of Him, like He's mad at me all the time. And a lot of times what we do in Christianity is say that's a spiritual problem. You don't have enough faith. And therefore now that person who feels guilty, like their sins are still scarlet, feels even worse because they can't even trust that God forgives them. And you get this spiral. And a lot of problem in our Christian life is that if we make everything only this digital spiritual issue, do you choose to obey, choose to believe, and if you don't, then you must be in sin. And if you don't fold in, one of the biggest things missing in the church is what we were talking about, what I call a developmental perspective, that we're running all of our spirituality through software. And a lot of times what has to happen is that software needs to get healed. And as it gets healed, all of a sudden the lights will start to come on about God. It's very strange. I've even seen it happen with non-Christians. I've had non-Christian clients who, I won't sit down and, share the gospel with them. I'm going to help them with their depression. But in doing that, I'm starting to teach them about grace and about love and about connection and about safety. And I had one of them come into my office once and say, we were out of town visiting some friends in Michigan, and they took us to church. And the guy was preaching, and it sounded like the kind of stuff you've been teaching me in here. She said, I think you've been teaching me about God all along without telling me. And I'm like, me? What? In fact, once you sort of develop that software, it's almost like pre-evangelism. A lot of times people are a lot more open. So one of the coolest things about doing therapy is I call myself, I self-identify as a missionary to Christians. In other words, what I want to do is speak to Christians like this and say, hey, guess what? If you're struggling in your marriage, it might not be just because you're a horrible sinner or whatever like that. It might be because you never learned about what loving connection was about. And if you learn it, the lights will come on, and then you'll turn around and you'll hear Paul say, hey, you've not received a spirit of slavery that leads to fear. You've received a spirit of adoption as sons, by whom we cry, Abba, Father. And you might cry like me, because that thing in you that says, yeah, I want to be adopted, I want to be a son, you have the software. Okay? So a lot of times I tell my clients who say, I don't feel God, I'm like, well, the truth is that God is like, his love is like the radio. I mean, there are radio waves in this room, but your radio is kind of broken. And you cut it on, it's like, and you're like, I can't feel God's love. I'm like, well, then it's not because God doesn't love you or because you're not a faithful Christian. It's your love radio is broken. And if we fix it, and as we start to heal it, and they start to get these categories for let you in, keep you in, they start going, oh my gosh, I'm flooded with God's love. That's one of the things I wanted to do in the one story is take what we call covenant theology and put that level of God's heart back into it. Of how do we see that God's story is the story of Him saying, above all things, I want you. Do you even have a category for that? And look at the centuries-long process I would go through to create a doorway for you back to me. Again, that's His heart. And that's some of what I want to do in the book is to speak at that level because we don't so often. Thank you. That's such a beautiful question. I'm going to do one out of the phone. I liked this one. Somebody sent yesterday. They said, as a hypercritical person, good for you. They heard my story about the person who criticized me on my birthday, and I said, yeah, but you don't know how bad I really am. My real question is, do you love me? And they said, if I said that to you, I would feel not really heard because you weren't really engaging the things that I was bringing to you that were problematic. I thought that was an interesting question. I thought it was the most interesting that this person said that they were hypercritical. So they're saying, I'm a person who's very critical, and yet if you just said, I want you to understand I really am these so many bad things you say, they wouldn't feel heard. I'm not sure if what they want is to be heard. If you're still here, I don't know if you were here last night, if you're still here. Here's what being heard would sound like if you're hypercritical. And I love that you self-identify as that. I totally understand that those kind of things hook you. And you and I both know that you can tend to be really critical, and when things don't go the way you want, that can really feel terrible to you. And there's so many things I do that don't feel good to you. I so hear that. I wish I could change so many of them. And I care. That's what hearing would sound like. Do you really want to be heard? I think your question is, if I just said, yeah, that's the way I am, you would feel disregarded in the sense that I wouldn't be changing the things you're pointing out. If that's what you're saying, I would respond like this. I would say, I tell you what, since you are gracious enough to know that you can tend to be critical, and you have these complaints against me, I tell you what, why don't we both get curious? I'm certainly willing to look at these things you're pointing out about me that are so icky about me. And are you willing to get curious about how much of this might be your hypocriticalness? Let's get curious together, babe. Let's lock arms. Let's work together. Anytime somebody comes at me with, and the person in my example yesterday was not my spouse. I think I owe my spouse more engagement than I gave that person. But with my spouse, if they're coming at me with you're a this, and you're a that, and you're a this, and this is your fault, I want to say, you know what? Probably is. But I tell you what, I'm not really willing to have an interaction with you about how bad I am until you're willing to have a curiosity together about how could we both be bringing some junk to this table. The moment you're willing to have that, how are we both contributing question, I will join you. Okay? But I'm not going to get into like, no, I'm not. Yes, you are. And we're into a fight. Okay? I have a client who, she'll say to her husband, oh my gosh, you so hurt my feelings. And I'm like, could we soften that a little bit? Let's get a little more curious. What you said really hurt my feelings, and I'm not sure if that was your mouth or my ears. Maybe I'm being too sensitive. Maybe you're being a jerk. I'm not sure. Can we get curious together about it? Now you're solving a problem. Last one, solve a problem, not fighting. Okay? So that humility to get curious about something you're critical about and to solve the problem together, not just be heard. I just kind of want to swing back to that one. All right. Yes, Kita. Yeah, that's actually an RUF drinking game. It's a joke. Like, what do you? It's like, how many times will John Cox touch his wrist during a talk? It's like every time it's like shot. It's like a joke. Then what do you call that? Shot. Because somebody came up to me. It was like it was 8 times tonight. But anyway, right? Like, okay.
What would you say to someone who, takes the pulse and there isn't any? So, it's like, okay, how are you feeling? I have no idea. Like, I've done such a great job of not feeling that there aren't feelings there. Because you can't share and have that intimacy. You don't have the feelings or you can't recognize them.
Okay. Is that person interested in developing that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, then I think that, that's an unbelievably common situation. I mean, a huge strategy that we develop, either because we grew up in a family in which nobody even addressed that. It was like, not a category, so I never learned it. Or maybe there was enough stuff in the family that was painful enough to where you just learned to shut that part of us off, Learning to cut that part of us back on can be a little difficult. And if the person wants to grow there, then it would be really cool and helpful for them to do that with somebody else, because somebody else kind of has to call that out of us. We have to have somebody external to us to call it out. All right, and what that looks like is this. Let me tell you how I would do it in the office. That person says, I don't feel things. I don't feel anything. And I'm like, well, tell me a story. And they might say, well, I was interacting with my wife the other day, and my wife says, how do you feel about that? And I just didn't feel anything. And then she sort of got mad and walked out of the room. And I'm like, how'd that feel to you? And they'll go, I don't know, yucky. I'm like, all right, there's one. All right. In other words, with somebody who's emotionally disconnected, what they need is a good bird watcher. It's like if you're a bird watcher, you see birds when other people don't. Like I have a friend who's like, you're driving down the national trail, he's like, oh, there's a deer. Oh, there's another deer. I didn't see any deer. I don't know how they see these deer. Emotions are the same way, and what happens is, routinely, when I work with somebody who's disconnected emotionally, it's like, as we're talking, I'll spot one, I'll go, there, right there. I just saw it flicker across your face. And they'll go, yeah, you're right. I just had this memory. I'm like, really, of what? I'm like, me and my brothers. It's like it was always this competition. And I'm like, oh, now I can really see you're feeling something. And they're like, yeah, I don't want to feel it. I'm like, of course you don't. Let's back off from it. All right? But we went there and touched it, okay? And that's how you do it. You sort of develop calluses. It's like pretty soon I can touch it a little bit longer. You have somebody coach into that, because emotions that have never been tamed, emotions that have never been connected to with another person, will flood us and feel overwhelming and terrifying if we engage them unawares. Okay? In other words, we learn about emotion as children, and children are ultimate. And so that feeling, like when you walk into your first grade classroom and it's like, oh my gosh, the room's so little. I remember it being this giant room. Okay, as children, we internalize feelings like that. So if I feel hurt or scared or shamed as a child, it feels gigantic. And one of the cool things about therapy is when you re-experience it or connect with it with another person in another room, you kind of go, oh, I thought this feeling would kill me if I touched it, and it might have if they touched it alone, but if you touch it with somebody else, there's that magic thing. If I connect with them and help them touch the feeling with me, they start to kind of plug in the plugs again. But it's really hard to do by yourself. Good news is, if they want to grow there, there's lots of resources of people who can help them kind of learn to spot it like a bird watcher. Because they don't know their feeling, but you can see it on their face. You can see the eyes flicker. You can feel it. You can hear it in their voice. And if you catch it there, right there, they'll so often go, yeah. And they start to wake up a little at a time. Y'all have had such good questions.
So I love this framework. What if the problem is not a problem? It is you're just made differently. So God made one person this way, the other person this way, and they're so that it's not that there's some kind of problem that one of us has to be solved.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a sense of like, we're actually really different in this area. And you have this, let's just say hypothetically.
Yeah.
Hypothetically.
Hypothetically.
One of us was into adventure, and one of us was into comfort. Or so it's not that either one of us are wrong.
One of you is comfortable speaking in public, and the other one wants to wither into a little hole in the ground. Are you talking about something like that?
So that's the question. Is like
Oh, okay. I
a
gotcha.
problem to be solved.
No, right. All right. So, but what makes that into a fight?
Because I want my way.
Uh-huh. I'm reeling you in here. Come on. Come on.
Yeah, I think selfishness and sin and like not sitting with the sadness, but like wanting to like throw that at the other person and
Yeah.
those all of that.
All right, good. All right. Who else has a question? Since he's answered his question. No, okay, seriously. I was jokingly saying earlier the horrible truth of the fact that you married somebody who wasn't you. Okay? I'm only half teasing because there's so much loss. And it's those simple little things. I travel so much for work, I hate travel. Norman wants to travel. I hate travel. I want to have people over. I like to cook. I want to have a ton of people over. I want to cook for them. If that Norma would be wringing her hands with anxiety for a week before that. She can't stand it. So I never get that. Now we'll do a win-win, and sometimes we will, sometimes we won't. But you touched the real issue, and that is one of the hallmarks of maturity and one of the hallmarks of adulthood and one of the hallmarks of love is to what degree can I engage in a relationship with you in which we say, I want adventure, you want comfort. Can we stretch a little bit? Let's have an adventure. Let's have a comfort. Let's go to rafting the Ocoee, but let's stay in the glitziest hotel nearby. Let's somehow take care of each other, all right? But to what degree can we work to create a way in which we both matter, in which we both give, in which we both receive? And then the second piece of that, and this is true for all growth, I say to people the goal of therapy is to help you get the things that you are missing and fill those empty spaces or blind spots up. And number two, to help you develop that ability to grieve that we talked about last night for the things you'll never get. And so one of the reasons we fight is because we protest, and that is I feel so much sadness and loss because it would be so wonderful for me if you were like me in this and we could just share that and enjoy it, and you're not. And that doesn't make you bad, it just makes us different. And I'm going to approach that by letting myself feel sad about it. And that sadness is that sadness I talked to y'all about last night that is holy. That is a sadness that is a letting go, that says, it's like I told you about Norma. Norma is not this super emotionally intuitive, connected person. I feel sadness about that. But sadness is the best example of that Jim Elliot quote. Remember, he is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. Sadness doesn't just help metabolize the bad, sadness makes room for the good. So as I was saying about Norma, she's not the super emotionally intuitive person, but I never come home to crazy. And so, yeah, there's a loss there, but there's a benefit there. And as we grieve what's not there, what we do is it creates actual mental space for us to let the good really be good. And that's another factor of grieving. So when you're talking about that leading to a fight, usually what that's about is I feel sorrow and loss because I can't have this experience with you. And instead of engaging in that loss after you and I have worked to try to let each other matter, I'm going to protest it and fight it, and we're going to be in conflict, and it leads to a fight. So you're right on target. I don't think it's all necessarily selfishness or sin. It's also just loss is a huge thing to metabolize. Humans have a lot of trouble with loss. It's hard to just give up things that we long for. That's why we need to have grieving. But I think you were on target about that. How can we manage loss together? How do we give to one another? Let's both get uncomfortable some. And number two, can I sit with loss and sadness? If you can do that, then you get to teach the seminar next time. Yeah.
So along the same line of questioning, you're alone in bed, right, with sadness. Like if it's unsure, it could be money, it could be
Mm-hmm.
like you want to save what your partner wants to.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's not it's bad or anything. It's just that the way of that you feel alone. It's the one person that you want to be your wife or spouse to be. I understand that, but because they're different, it's hard for them to see it your way. So kind of like you feel still alone and lonely.
Yeah.
Like that adds to the complexity of like a frustration and it's not working, you're stuck, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So the fear is that kind of like a big corner or trapped in that sense of like if this is what life is, this is not what I wanted, and this is you kind of like spiral up into that lonely, frustrated feeling.
Ah. All right, so there's a sense in which you're saying, okay, sometimes if I engage loss or sadness, even if healthy sadness, I can feel that 2 + 2 = 7 start to develop, that it starts to get bigger and bigger. All right? I've got that same kind of glitch in me. So after I realized Norma didn't want to hear about my funeral, I could feel my little kid parts going to, oh my gosh, like how alone and not seen and not understood and not mattering and not cared about. And I start to go kind of ultimate with it. Now I've learned his voice and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like he's 5 years old and he's crying in the corner. And it's like, A, I want to love on that part of me. And I ended up talking to some of my safe people about it later in the week. And B, I'm not going to let him drive. And I'm going to say, I know that this is that catastrophic, ultimate little kid thinking. And so I'm not going to let that rule the day. But I do want to engage people. And it's like, okay, so there's a place in my marriage where I feel lonely and I feel myself going catastrophic, like I'll always be lonely. Well, I want to be bringing that to some of the body of Christ people too. Okay? Because my loneliness is not just resolved in my marriage. Okay? Remember that 2 ticks and no dog? We need to have other people in there too. So, got time for 1 or 2 more? Yes, sir.
So this, maybe kind of similar to this question, I was trying to formulate this. Kind of goes back more to last night when you were talking about like the head and the heart gap.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think a lot of times I kind of go to the head, like what's the theological reason behind this? Like for example, I'm very hypersensitive to criticism. So I've kind of come to learn that sometimes she's just trying to give feedback or like a better way. Yet, so theologically, I think like what's the deeper root? Like I know you were asking, like being curious about that, but like, kind of thinking like Augustine's quote of, Lord, you have made us for yourself, and we're going to be restless until we rest in thee. So I'm like, is it like how to balance theological with the psychological being? Is it really because like I don't really believe that God loves me, that I'm fully accepted inside, so that's why I can't be okay with criticism, and like, well, I'm okay if I'm not getting confident love because I know that I'm secure. Does that make sense?
I think it does. I tell you, like, if you and I were talking about it and you had that question, I mean, there's a sense in which you're asking the question, to what degree is this theological, in the sense of, there's a big thing in Christian culture now of idols. And anything that I invest a lot in and my heart feels investment in, must be an idol. So if I feel ashamed, like I don't do a good conference for y'all and y'all didn't like it, then I must be making an idol out of y'all. I don't agree with that. I think a ton of the things that really hook us or come out of our injuries and our hungers and our thirsts. Now, once I have my software working well, and I choose to invest my heart in things like adoration, or never being criticized, or being admired, or amazing, that might be an idol. But so one of the questions I would talk about, if you and I were talking about it, was, well, let's get curious. To what degree do you see this concern about, I can't rest because criticism feels something like it's something real scary for me? I mean, join the club. How pervasive is that? Is that just with your wife? And what we might see is, so this is kind of a theme for you in a lot of different places. So probably it's more of a software glitch rather than just an Augustine glitch. Okay. Now, if we can kind of smooth out, clean up that software glitch, help make sense of what you do with that shame, then what will happen is your heart will settle a lot more, and you'll probably find yourself kind of feeling a lot freer to just rest in God's love. It's so often not the case with repentant people. With unrepentant people, it's different. But with repentant people, it's often not the case that Christians aren't committed enough, or they like sinning, or whatever. Most Christians I talk to are tired. They feel defeated and discouraged and scared. I'm trying so hard and I'm always failing. Is God mad at me? And what they need is comfort and healing, to finally at last be the way they want to be. Most Christians aren't walking around going, I want to be this horrible person. Most Christians are walking around going, why am I such a horrible person? What's wrong with me? Why can't I be better? That's why I like being a missionary to Christians. Because it's like, well, actually, it may be that you're just a wounded person whose sin is getting involved in there too, and we can have cool answers, and you don't have to be held prisoner by this anymore, much less live under self-condemnation about it. And once they get that freedom, they actually start being more obedient. They start trusting God more. Okay? Can I do another phoner, just because y'all have sent me so many phones, and I'm thankful, and I'm not going to be able to get to them all.
Yeah, I will be.
Thank you for this. Hang on just a second. Somebody just said something good and funny, and I appreciate it. I don't plan to stop using that joke. How should a couple manage long-term lack of physical intimacy while neither person is having their emotional needs met? That it is unfortunately a very common thing. And what it implies is a legacy of hurts. In other words, remember that thing of we're not able to, one of the biggest problems is we don't know how to heal hurt when we've caused it. And so we end up having 1,000 gashes, and we're dragging across the floor a bloody leg. If your marriage is in that kind of place, there's enough backlog of injuries to where both of you are too afraid to go to physical intimacy, or emotional intimacy. That would be a really good sign for you to talk to somebody. Because if you both feel that lost in it, that's a good tell of get a third party involved. Probably a therapist kind of person. Somebody can really get surgical, very careful and wise. Like if you cut your brachial artery, I'm not doing you any good to give you a Band-Aid. Go to an ER and get somebody really who knows what they're doing to help you. If the legacy has that kind of a long-standing kind of hurt, I'd be doing you a disservice to recommend anything less rigorous. All right, question? I heard a woman's voice. Yeah. I'm willing to stay a little bit longer if you're okay with that. And if any of y'all need to jump out of here right at noon, you may leave and I will not be offended. But I'm good staying and doing a little bit more.
It was actually one of the phone rooms, but it's fine.
Okay.
You may not have seen it. So I had two questions actually. The first one is a very quick answer. How long do you think is a reasonable amount of time to time out?
20, 25 minutes. That tends to be my ballpark. But if that's not enough, if you're so hooked, then take more. Because it's better that it take more than you come in with your guns blazing.
And we've been told in premarital counseling that is a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah.
If you need more time, time back in to take more time.
Yeah. And you can time out 17 times in a day. Okay? Oh, I'm triggered again. Yep. I'd rather you do that than go guns blazing. All right.
And the other question was, do you have any tips on how to select your trusted body of Christ? I put on here that it's kind of scary to select any random person within that body of Christ to share certain depths and roles with. So do you have any tips on who to select or who to
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's good. All right. Y'all know the answer to this question. What do you need in a person who you would tell your heart to? Just start naming stuff. Give me one of them. Confidentiality. Let's start with that one. Why is gossip listed as one of those, where is it? Is it Romans 1? Where it's like, Paul's like talking about all this list of these horrible sins. It's like, and they are murderers and adulterers and haters of God. And they are gossips and they are malicious. And it's like, I'm thinking, wow, my supper club made it into the pantheon of iniquity. It's like, whoa, it's like with the axe murderers and, why is gossip in there? Well, remember what I've been telling you. Where's the only place that my heart's ever really going to grow at that heart level is when it's known by another person, okay? Now, what am I never, ever, ever going to do if I think you're going to share my secret? I'm going to keep my secret, and I'm going to hide it, and I'm going to be alone, and guess what? I will never grow. And so one of the reasons that gossip is condemned so rigorously in Scripture is because it is the growth destroyer. And it is at the level, it is in so many ways very similar to, parallel to, and as destructive and as rampant as pornography. Gossip and pornography are in the same little universe. They're just as destructive. And yet you can be in Sunday school and you'll hear somebody going, well, did you hear about so-and-so? I mean, you don't see people looking at porn in Sunday school, but we gossip like it's no big. All right, so fundamental is I'm never going to share my heart unless you keep it to yourself and not even tell your spouse. Oh, I can tell you you're my spouse. No, you can't. If I'd wanted to tell your wife about my drinking problem, I would have invited her out to beers too, okay? I was just telling you, okay? All right, what else do we need in a safe person? Huh? Not biased? Yeah, like they don't have an agenda, they don't need something from us. Yeah, okay, now most of my safe people now are friends, and that means we take turns. And that, huh?
Bias more so, not taking one side versus the other.
Yeah, right. In other words, let's frame it like this. One of the things y'all are going to say in a second is that a safe person is grace-filled. In other words, they're not going to condemn you. They're not going to judge you. Why? What makes someone full of grace? Why did I tell you that we forgive one another? What is a human basis for forgiveness? Anyone? What? We're all broken, right. In other words, why am I not a judgmental person? Well, I will not be judgmental to the degree that I see how screwed up I am, okay? Which is one of the reasons it's important for therapists to be in their own therapy, right? So I will not be judgmental, not because I am such a loving, gracious person. It's because, oh man, you're telling me that? You wouldn't believe I got it worse than that, okay? And so I've got this mercy, all right? So there's this lack of judgment because I see my own brokenness. I remember doing an RUF thing at Vandy, in fact, and this college student goes, "What are some tips you have on becoming more humble?" And I said, "Well, that's the easy question tonight. I got that one's easy. Like the rest of these have been hard. That's easy. You want to get humble? Tell the truth. If you tell the truth about who you are, you're going to get humble real quick. Next question, okay?" So, in other words, I'm going to not be judgmental to the degree that I'm aware of my own junk. Now, secondly, if all we do is have grace, acceptance, that's only half the gospel. In other words, grace and truth, peace and righteousness. If all your friends are going, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe he said that to you," get new friends, all right? We need friends who'll stab us in the front, like I said last night. We need friends who'll go, well, you know, like I said to the person on the question, you're the one who said you were a chronic complainer. You're very hypercritical. Maybe he's responding that way because you're kind of critical. Now, as I said earlier, truth always comes after grace with repentant people. And that means I'm going to go, oh my gosh, I totally get that. I hear you. There's the grace. I do see something like you got a piece of spinach on your tooth. I need to point out something here that's a problem. Are you willing? Are you a good place to hear that? So grace is sort of the anesthesia before I drill the cavity. Okay. So we're going to balance grace and truth. In that sense, not being biased. All right. What else do we look for?
Like not being a project,
Not becoming their project.
like trying to fix you is the
Not fixing us. That's a good one. People who don't jump to advice, people who don't jump to Bible versing you. It requires sitting with some tension to be able to let somebody hurt and be with them. By the way, notice we're answering almost all of y'all's questions with the building blocks we built this weekend. That's my goal. I keep pulling from this paint palette of things we've talked about to answer your questions. That's what I want y'all to have from this conference. So you can be able to apply this kind of out on freestyle on the road. So people who aren't fixers. Now, how do you find these people? That's behind your question too. And then we probably should wrap up. Like I said last night, I call them seashells. And that is, I have a conversation with somebody and I go, that person's they kind of get it, you know? And so, you know, you're hanging out with them, maybe after Sunday school, and they're like, how you going? How's it doing? How you doing? And you go, I don't know. Sometimes my wife drives me crazy. And if he goes, well, you know, husbands should love their wives as Christ loved the church. Say, all right, never mind. It's like, all right. You kind of got this ear out for these people, right? But they may say, oh my gosh, me too. I kind of lost it at mine. I mean, is marriage not the hardest thing you've ever done? And I'm like, yes. All right, so maybe next time I'm going to share something else. And maybe I'll share something else. And then at some point we'll have a little conversation where it's like, hey, you want to kind of be like body of Christ dudes, you know? Because like I need somebody to talk to sometime, and you've been so kind, giving me some wisdom. And like me and my business partner, we take turns. We're like, you got any openings, you know, in your schedule? And we'll flip around, take care of each other. And we've been there for each other in some of the like yuckiest times in one another's lives, and we trade licks, we trade off. In that sense, a friendship can do something a marriage can't. That's not two ticks and no dog. Something about marriage makes that more difficult. Anyway. Okay. Thank y'all. Marriage is one of the hardest things you'll ever do. You know, and if you're doing it halfway well, you're ahead of most people. And the fact that you're here shows that you care. Tell that to the person you ride home with. I care about this. I want you to use these things that I've told you. I want you to make mistakes with these things that I've told you. I want you to repair and heal those mistakes. The things I've told you. But mostly I want you all to have the courage and the categories and the tools now more to actually engage marriage as the difficult, crazy undertaking that it is, okay? I've wanted to kind of equip you all in that sense, all right? So go break some eggs, you know?